We are going to tell you a story worthy of a screenplay, because once more you become convinced of how varied and unpredictable life is. How much can be done just because you truly love life. We'll be talking about the life story of Yuriy Gorlis-Horsky, the man who wrote the well-known novels Kholodnyi and Dictator, and many other books. As always, let's start from the very beginning. Yuriy Gorlis-Horsky, born Yuri Yuryevich Kholodnyi, was born on the 14th of January in 1898 in the village Demidivka in Poltava region to an officer's family. He graduated from a school in Poltava. He participated in the First World War from 1917. At the age of 20, he joined the Zaporizhia division, the UPR, as a cavalry sergeant major of the Zaporizhia regiment during the National Revolution. When he became ill, he accidentally joined the insurgent units of Kholodnyi in Cherkasy region, was an assail of the First Kuren and participated in the military operations of the Kholodnyi Republic in 1918-1921. As you know, consequence is no coincidence. After leaving the underground in the spring of 1921, he arrived in Lviv and became a liaison officer for the UPR government. From May 1922, he worked as a school inspector of education in one of the border towns in Podillia, and at the same time he had to cross the border repeatedly. Under the nickname Gorsky, he carried the underground work in Kiev and then in Podillia. He spent 8 months in a GPU prison in Vinnytsia and was released in 1923. On the instructions of the UPR, Gorsky agreed to cooperate with GPU agents, so to say helping the Chekists to fail their operations. In other words, he was a double agent. Naturally, after all of this, Yuriy Gorsky was imprisoned for 15 years in 1924 for anti-communist activities. That was when he began to simulate mental disorders. Since the hospital is not a prison, you can escape from it. Later, he was transferred to the Kherson Psychiatric Hospital, from where he finally managed to escape in 1931. Then there was the Don, the Cuban, and finally the escape hid from his persecutors, where it was most difficult to find him, as they say, inside, namely at the construction project of communism, or rather Avtostory in Nizhny Novgorod. The money he earned allowed him to cross the Ukrainian-Polish border in 1932 and reach Rivne. This period of his life clearly shows how much he loved this life. In the same year, Yuriy Gorlis-Horsky moved to Lviv and lived at 5 Rynok Square, apartment 7. It was here that he began to write. His first work, A Dictator, dedicated to Stalin, was published in 1933 and in 1934. In the assistance of Metropolitan Sheptytsky was published the first volume of Kholodnyi Yar, which Galician youth grabbed like hotcakes, immersing themselves in the heroic struggle of peasant rebels in central Ukraine. Later, these same young people also made history, becoming a symbol of the struggle for Ukraine. In 1939, death again placed with Gorsky, sort of competing with him. After an unsuccessful attempt to proclaim Carpathian Ukraine, the Hungarians brutally persecuted Ukrainians. Yuri, with his 2 comrades, tried to get to Romania. The only bridge to freedom was across the Tisa river, but it was never to be. Once again, the key word that permeates his entire life is freedom. Because what is life if there is no freedom? One of his comrades was shot dead by the Magyars, while Gorlis-Horsky and Mykola Sidor-Zartorsky fled into the mountains. They forded the fast-flowing Tisa during the ice drift. Only some supernatural instinct of self-preservation, superhuman passion for life, and his companion's knowledge of different languages, including Latin, saved the cold Ravine activist from certain death. Everything worked out, but still so far. Later, fate threw Lisovsky to Greece and then to Turkey. He described his travels in Traveler's Zigzags. This is how he saw Turkish women of that time. In the train, besides us, there were 3 strangers, the new intelligentsia of the new Turkey, the same as in Istanbul, in Ankara. Nowhere else have I seen such short skirts, deep neckline, and heavily powdered women's faces as there. It is clear that the slogan to catch up with and overtake Europe has taken hold in this area. Now the situation has changed a bit, but that's a different story. Then fate threw Gorlis-Horsky to Finland. He conducted secret service activities in Leningrad, and from 1941 he headed the Ukrainian department of a radio station in Berlin. One of the writer's greatest dreams came true in 1942 when he returned to Kholodnyi. He was able to visit the parents of atamans Petro and Vasil Chuchpak. He managed to restore Vasil Chuchpak's grave by attaching a trident to a metal cross. Around the same time, the grave of the Chorny Voron, Black Raven, near Razumivka was restored and consecrated. Therefore, researchers of Gorlis-Horsky life attribute this to him. Just imagine how much he had to go through and even almost die just to visit his dead parents and to attach such an important symbolic trident to the cross. We will allow ourselves a glimpse into Yuri's personal life. On his return to Lviv on November 26, 1943, Lisovsky married Halina Talashuk, whom he met for the first time in 1932 in Rivne. At that time, Gorlis-Horsky's future wife was 8 years old, and during the Easter celebration she hid under the table from her uncle, with whom she did not want to be baptized. And 10 years later he took her to the altar in the Orthodox Church of St. George. Yes, it sounds like a fictional written story, but life is the best writer. Then fate took them to Germany, where the couple settled in a camp for displaced persons (DP) in Neu-Ulm. Unfortunately, from that moment began the last part of his bright life, which he loved so much. It seemed that the worst was behind him. Years of struggle and deprivation, prisons, persecution. His page could be turned and he could move forward far away from Soviet tyranny. Seemingly, here is freedom, where he could continue to write in peace. So many times Yuriy Gorlis-Horsky cheated death by walking on a knife's edge. More than once, a requiem mass was performed for him and a cross was even placed near the Motronin monastery. But you can't be lucky forever, because life obviously has a certain balance, a stock of luck. Life itself in the camp for the displaced turned out to be more dangerous than enemy bayonets and bullets. Shortly afterwards, internecine strife broke out in Neu-Ulm. First of all, the Bagriani's flowers and those who stood in solidarity with them came under pressure. They were accused of having pro-Soviet sympathies, of wanting to return to the Soviet Union, and were presented as opponents of order. One of the reasons for this was the nickname of their leader, Bagriani, Crimson. And then Gorlis-Horsky said that he didn't want to relocate to America. He was staying in Europe because it was closer to Kholodnyi, writes Roman Koval, a researcher of Yuriy Gorsky's life. However, it should be mentioned that Bagriani urged people not to return to the Soviet Union, because for those who returned, camps and deaths awaited them. Even though the Soviets promised that nothing would happen to those who returned, but in reality, this was another lie of the Soviets. Obviously, the accusation of the Bagriani's flowers was most likely another game of Soviet intelligence service. Back in Lviv, Gorsky was accused of treason and attempted to be killed, but he again managed to wonderfully escape from fate's death. Meanwhile, in the camp against the fierce internecine political struggle, the threat to his life began to increase. The intrigues were intensified by the involvement of various intelligence services, such as British, American, and of course Soviet ones. Yuriy Gorsky's life increasingly remembers a spy thriller. Nevertheless, the decision to contact the intelligence service played a cruel joke on him. In addition, Soviet intelligence service poured oil on the fire, stoking hostility in the Ukrainian environment. The Soviets always used to do this with great inspiration and pleasure. What's more, this problem is still relevant today. But let's get back to Yuriy Gorlis-Horsky. He hoped to put an end to this with the support of the chief of the British intelligence service MI6, Charles. However, this very person played a fatal role in the writer's fate. On the 25th of September 1946, Yuriy Gorlis-Horsky gave birth to a daughter who was named Larissa in honor of Lesya Ukrainka. Yet, this incident also looks like an episode from an action film, especially given what is about to happen. On September 26, Colonel Dasko held a meeting with General Omelanovich Pavlenko, Colonel Doluda, the director of the Ukrainian news, publishing house, Maizura and Gorlis-Horsky. On September 27th, Kholodnyi Lisovsky was to meet with Charles, the chief of British intelligence. He arrived at the meeting by train from Augsburg, where a jeep with Americans was waiting for him. That was the last time Boris Levitsky and Roman Paladichuk saw him. It is still unknown who the mysterious Americans were. According to one version, they were camp SS officers. Boris Levitsky tried to establish the circumstances of his friend's disappearance and described his search in the murder of Horlis-Horsky. According to his version, Yuri's friends took him to a house where he tried to escape from the attacker's hands and threw a chair through the window to attract someone's attention, but they put a noose around his neck and strangled him. Here is another version of the cause of Yuri's death. Canadian historian of Ukrainian descent Serhiy Yakelchuk wrote, in 1946, the former Sergeant Major of the UPR army was strangled by bandieritis and apparently cemented into the floor of the camp for displaced persons in Neu-Ulm. However, this statement can be questioned, as a few years after these tragic incidents, the director of the publishing house, Petro Maiziora, who hadn't stopped looking for his friend Yuri, was visited by the head of the German criminal police. He told him that a dead body was found in the sewers of Augsburg near the barracks of the Soviet repatriation mission of the NKVD, and that his description matched Gorlis-Horsky. Here, inserted teeth, tattoos, height, and clothing. The body had been preserved but is sealed, but it was not shown to those who were looking for Yuri, nor was it told where he was buried. Who else could have done this, especially since the Soviets had so many reasons to kill Yuri? He masterfully cheated the Chekists, who thought they were the best in the world. And don't forget about the novel dedicated to Stalin, which the Chekists were clearly not happy about. We can conclude that the German police did have information about Yuri's death. Halina, Yuri's wife, who was in hospital after giving birth, also knew nothing about his disappearance. For 2 more years, she hoped that Yuri was alive and was merely imprisoned in some prison. The rumors spreading among the refugees that Horlis-Horsky had escaped to the Soviets added to her hope. I waited for Yurko for 2 years, hoping that he would turn up until I lost hope, wrote his wife Halina. To this day, Yuri's disappearance is a puzzle that does not give the whole picture, just fragments of information. Both then and now, Ukraine and Ukrainians have the same goal: to survive, to preserve ourselves as a nation, and not to dissolve the wanderings through the world. We are creating historical videos supported by our sponsors and donators, so please join in. All the details are in the description box below.